Over the last few months, I've seen many people talking and speculating as to if or when more stimulus will be done by the Federal Reserve. And although it has taken much longer than originally expected, I'll discuss why much more stimulus is likely coming in the next few months and definitely in the next year, so stay tuned. Hello everybody, welcome back to The Contrarian. My name's Logan. I really like to talk about overall success in investing, and I also really like to talk about going against conventional narratives and conventional ways of thinking, either in the markets or elsewhere. So if you like these kinds of topics, just consider subscribing. I also want to make a disclaimer that obviously I'm not involved with the Federal Reserve at all, and I have nothing to gain or lose from this, but just don't take any of this as financial advice. So to begin with, I want to take a minute to put the current situation we are in into perspective. This is not just some ordinary recession, nor is it affecting only the United States. Rather, this is a much more significant economic downturn we have experienced in the last several months. And the United States is definitely not alone in this. In fact, basically every other developed country has experienced similar disastrous effects to their economies because of all the damage the COVID lockdowns have caused. Now the lockdowns are a whole separate subject for another video, but let's just say that they are probably one of the biggest mistakes we have made as a country and as a developed world. Of course, we didn't know how severe this disease was actually going to be, but looking back now, it's evident that taking the course of a country like Sweden did, and just to briefly summarize this, they were basically the only developed country that did not fully lock down. Instead, they let healthy people go about their lives, going to their jobs, keeping their businesses open. But they closed down their borders and all international travel, and they encouraged people vulnerable to the virus to isolate. And get this, they've had very similar, if not equal, mortality rates as countries who fully locked down. So the lockdowns clearly didn't really do anything to flatten the curve or to keep people from dying. So to see some states now and countries going down into full lockdown again is just the definition of stupidity, according to Einstein. They are doing the exact same thing over again, expecting different results. But now let's move on from the lockdowns. So hopefully you begin to see how difficult of a situation this has put the economy. As a result of the lockdowns, we've had the highest unemployment we have seen since the Great Depression. We also saw the highest rate of business failures since the Great Depression as well, as hundreds of thousands of small businesses were forced to close down. And many of these businesses, many of which had very thin savings and margin of error, many of them are closing down permanently. So this is definitely not a good sign. And the majority of employment in this economy comes from small businesses. It does not come from these big S&P 500 companies, these big NASDAQ companies. It does not come from these. It's something like, it's the majority of employment. It comes from these small businesses. So this is not good news. So in the coming months, we're probably, unfortunately, going to continue to see this trend of small businesses closing permanently and potentially unemployment going back up, and larger corporations such as Amazon, Target, Walmart, Google, Facebook, etc. continuing to grow. So bottom line is, I don't think we are recovered from the shutdowns we experienced in March, and this is not going to be a V-shaped recovery. And even though this is what the stock market's largest companies have seen, and therefore the stock market has actually seen a V-shaped recovery, this is not what the real economy is experiencing. So where am I going with this? I'm basically saying that at some point the Federal Reserve will need to do more stimulus. It won't matter if they would prefer to begin tightening their balance sheet again. They will be forced out of necessity to enact more stimulus. Likewise, if politicians keep fighting over it and postponing it and arguing over it, people will become very angry, and stimulus in some way, shape, or form will pass at some point. Now, I'm not arguing that this is a good thing. In fact, it's likely going to come back to bite us as the Fed's balance sheet continues to expand, but it's where we are right now. Sure, I'm definitely probably going to disagree with how the stimulus is allocated, how it's distributed in the economy, but this is the situation the Fed is in right now. And in my opinion, it's impossible to expect them to suddenly change course and hold off on stimulus. I see someone like Peter Schiff say that we should just go back to the gold standard right now and this would fix all of our future problems. And this has some truth in it, but the Fed just is not going to do this. Going back to a gold standard right now and making it impossible to expand our money supply would cause an immediate depression. And sure, we would eventually recover from it within several decades, but it would take a significant amount of time to do that. And the Federal Reserve simply is not going to do this. So even though in theory it isn't a sustainable thing to be doing, with all this stimulus and expanding the balance sheet to these levels, the Fed has no other choice at this point. They have to go ahead and do this. So this is a very long way of saying that yes, stimulus is far from being over in my opinion, and that there are likely to be, several rounds more of stimulus that go through, not just one. When this eventually happens, I have no idea. But the Fed is in a very tough place right now. Politicians are in a very tough place right now. Our economy is in shambles. They cannot begin quantitative tightening. The Fed cannot begin tightening their balance sheet, and they will be forced to do more quantitative easing, also known as stimulus, in the coming months and definitely in the coming year. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this. I'd love to hear what you guys think about what I talk about, and I hope to see you again.